We're going to be taking a look at two of the revolutionary Fender acoustic designs and figuring out which one's right for you. Fender guitars obviously are revolutionaries themselves and have been for many, many years, highly regarded as the first company to produce the electric guitar with the Telecaster, or depending if you want to give it its proper name, the Broadcaster, back in 1950. But they're absolutely no strangers to the acoustic game as well. The California series, which I've done a full run through as well, if you do want to check them out, link above my head there. They are a bunch of really, really cool kind of modern day acoustics, but are very much still rooted in traditional acoustic sort of ethos, you know. Other than the fact that they have their iconic Fender headstock on them, they are very much just standard acoustic guitars that look awesome with their litany of colours. But what I'm going to be looking at today, as I mentioned in the intro there, is I'm going to be taking a look at the Fender Highway series, which is this one here, and I'm going to be looking at the Acoustasonic. Both of these kind of share similar territories when it comes to the Fender acoustic line, but both have got their own perks and both have got their own kind of pros and cons as well. So I'm going to be looking at that today, specifically for anybody who has been looking at either of those guitars and maybe, you know, is having a bit of a struggle deciding on which one would fit into their lives. So in terms of specs and whatnot, I'm not really going to go into too much depth with it because they both share quite similar specs in the sense, and even just to quickly speed run over just a couple of things, they both have mahogany bodies with spruce tops. They both have the Fender Modern C neck on them and have both got rosewood boards and obviously are Electro acoustic. Now the Highway series has got its own other models as well, which this is the Parlor version here, as I mentioned, with the spruce top, but you can get mahogany top as well, and there is a dreadnought version that is ever so slightly bigger, as you would imagine too. And if we're talking about the Acoustasonic as well, anybody who's familiar with Fender stuff, you'll know that there are a couple of different models with that, with the Stratocaster, with the Jazzmaster, and this one that I've got on my lap is the Mexican equivalent, just because in terms of price-wise, I wanted to compare the two together because they're very much in the same sort of ballpark as opposed to the American one that you can get with the Acoustasonic. But if we're going to start anywhere, and this is probably going to be the most important part, is we're going to be talking about what sounds the guitars can get out of them. Now, obviously, if we're just looking at either guitar, and I'm going to pick this one up again, I'm just going back and forward and picking the two of them up. The biggest thing that's really going to set them aside is that the Acoustasonic, you can get electric sounds out of that, and with the Highway, it's very much just acoustic sounds. So if that's all you needed to know, then there you go. That'll certainly help you make your decision. But there's a little bit more that goes under the hood, so let's just look into those right now. So if we're to look at the Highway series here, the controls very much similar to what you're getting on the Acoustasonic, bar the three-way selector switch. Now that's very, very easy to understand. You have a master volume and we have this EQ shift knob here as well. Now, much the same as the Highway, as I mentioned, we've done a full review of this, but with the Acoustasonic as well, just to preface this, if you do just want to get a more in-depth review of that, we've also done a video on that in the past. But regardless, let's talk about the Acoustasonic sounds first. So where most of the bulk of the sounds are going to be coming from with the Highway series models, especially if you are using this plugged in, is from that Fishman Fluence acoustic pickup that is just over the top of the sound hole there. Now, unlike the Acoustasonic that's got a blade selector, as I mentioned, to flick between the different sounds, the main one you're going to be focusing on is what some people may consider your tone knob on a traditional guitar, but what this is actually a tilt/EQ control that you can kind of blend between a couple of different sounds, especially if it's plugged in. I'm just going through a Neural DSP quad cortex. Found that really difficult to say there. There's not really anything colouring the sound of the acoustics, it's purely just a bit of compression just to boost up the signal, and a couple of extra features that I'll show with the Acoustasonic, and obviously a few delays and reverbs just to get all the ambient sounds that I had at the start. But if we're to listen to the Highway right now, quite a lot of scope that you can flick between with the two of them there, even just with that EQ shift. And of course, with it being an acoustic, that's going to change depending on what you're playing on it. So if obviously I was using a plectrum there, but if I was to do some sort of finger picking on this, even just with the, you know, kind of placing that wherever you want to within the full scope of the knob there, I feel there is quite a lot of scope, you know, for tones and quite a lot of shifting that you can do, and that's obviously without having to go through something like an EQ pedal or having any sort of kind of post sound sort of, you know, production going on with that. Now, if we're even just to very quickly shift over to the Acoustasonic, and I will show you the litany of sounds that you can get with just the acoustic setting on this as well. And I will just touch on what the rest of the controls do, and obviously all the positions are just after we've heard this. So unlike the Highway series models, what the Acoustasonic, particularly the Player Mexican edition of it, is doing, when you are on your acoustic setting, which is obviously just the blade selector up towards the top end of the body there, what you're going between with those, with your tone slash tilt slash EQ knob there, is you're actually flicking between two different sounds of acoustic that Fender are trying to emulate with this. Particularly for a small-bodied mahogany kind of parlor style guitar and a rosewood style dreadnought guitar, which when you can hear that a lot more kind of fuller bass response there, that's when you're on your dreadnought mode, and when it was a little bit thinner and a little bit smaller sounding as well, that was obviously when it went to the parlor mode there. Now, in comparison to the two of those, I definitely feel that they're kind of going for very similar sounds. Definitely a little bit more scope, I think, for EQ shifting with the Highway as opposed to the Acoustasonic. But that's not to say that the acoustic sounds on this weren't really cool. Obviously, where this really starts to differentiate from the Highway series is when you start implementing that pickup there, which is very much a full electric pickup. And you do that with a couple of extra modes just that you use on your three-way selector there. Now, let's just start on the full single coil sound here, which And that sound there, that's obviously us just going right through the quad cortex in a totally kind of, you know, dry sort of acoustic sound there. It sounds okay, but where a lot of the kind of magic with the Acoustasonic comes from, when I just do just a very quick adjustment on the quad cortex here, is actually I've activated a distortion patch now on there. I've brought in a much kind of heavier gain amplifier that then switching to the single coil there, it's going to be a full-blown electric sound. Which, what I was doing when I was using the blend knob, I guess I'll probably call that now on these. I think I've called it about 4 or 5 different names so far, but what that is doing is actually changing between a classic sort of telly pickup and a fat telly sound as well. You'll have heard just it getting a little bit more aggressive when I moved on to the second sort of sound on there. Now obviously that's going to be the biggest decider, I think, with the Acoustasonic, as I've said, is obviously if you need those electric sounds in a pinch, you know, if you have a song that uses both, then this is going to be the absolute perfect thing for you, because you can just run through, you know, something like a quad cortex or something like a helix or any sort of modeler, and with the press of a button you can switch between a different rig. Now obviously if you're running this through a traditional guitar amplifier that, you know, is more kind of suited to electric, you'll maybe need to do a little bit of EQ, especially for running an acoustic through it, because that will obviously dramatically change the tone. But certainly for a lot of modern guitarists who are using the kind of modeler sort of setup, this is something that I think is going to help a lot of people. Now, my only sort of piece of advice, and this is from very personal experience with this, is that these guitars are set up like acoustics in the sense that they have got acoustic strings on them. Obviously with the Highway, that is an acoustic guitar, so that's got acoustic strings on it, but it's exactly the same as the Acoustasonic here too. It has a very electric feeling neck, it's a very standard sort of scale length and whatnot, and even the radius and whatnot, it feels very much like an electric. But one of the things that kind of takes me a little bit of time to get used to, particularly with these guitars, is the tension of the strings, and if you do plan on doing any sort of lead stuff on it. So even if I, you know, for example, just do a little bit of noodling on here as well. Try as I might to get a pinch harmonic out of that, I think I maybe need something a bit hotter on, but basically what I wanted to kind of like demonstrate there is that it is possible to do it, but for me that felt quite different to obviously when you would play an electric guitar. It almost kind of reminded me of being like a kid and practicing like metal stuff on an acoustic guitar when I couldn't be bothered plugging my electric in. So take that obviously into consideration if you do want to go with the Acoustasonic side of things. Now there's one more setting that I just want to clear up on this guitar as well, and this is maybe going to be a bit of a decider obviously for anybody who is trying to decide between the two of them. But that middle position on the Acoustasonic as well, it's quite a unique sound that is just in this one as opposed to the Highway, and it's almost a kind of like lo-fi sort of sound. So I've flicked back to my acoustic setting here. You'll hear it goes between a kind of clean and then a sort of crunchy lo-fi, and I'm not adding anything onto the patch here, it's just the compressor and a little bit of room reverb as well. So that's quite a cool sound that is exclusive to the Acoustasonic as opposed to the Highway. More the fact that you can kind of get that like really, really sort of compressed lo-fi sort of sound just out of it, particularly if you're a fan of any sort of like solo acoustic stuff, or, you know, kind of a lot of R&B or even lo-fi music in itself. That's a really, really cool sort of effect just to be built directly into the guitar that's, you know, affecting the just the EQ of it, and almost like one of the fuller sounds on it, the lo-fi crunch, which is position 2 on the knob there, is giving this sort of emulation of a double-tracked guitar, which is just a really, really cool effect. So when it comes to the two guitars, the most important thing, as I mentioned, was the sound. Obviously the fact that you are able to get electric sounds out of the Acoustasonic and you are getting more focused acoustic sounds out of the Highway, that's going to be the main decider. But a few extra little bits, you know, hopefully cleared it up while I was going through. But then another couple of bits that I wanted to mention with it as well is the fact that the Highway series is actually thicker than the Acoustasonic here as well. So acoustically, this is going to be a lot louder, especially if you do want to sit and, you know, just strum on it at all. Not to say that the Acoustasonic isn't actually, you know, a loud instrument by itself. You get a lot more natural amplification. And then, of course, just even noticing it in the fact that this has got a cutaway on it, this does not, is going to be quite a factor for people as well. And then even little bits like the hardware and stuff as well. The Highway series has got the more kind of vintage style tuners on it, whereas the Acoustasonic's got the more modern ones on them there. But in terms of picking which ones that's right for you, it's purely based on the scenario. I would say, you know, if you need those electric sounds in a pinch as well as your acoustic, this is, you know, really, really solid for any sort of session player or anything, or anybody who uses that in their band. Whereas the Highway, if you are looking for just the easiest playing acoustic guitar that there is, that's got, you know, quite a few sounds that you can kind of change between on the fly, that's absolutely one for you to check out. But hopefully this has cleared things up between the sort of major differences between these two guitars. They can be quite obvious on the surface, but when you kind of start getting underneath and kind of checking out all the sounds and stuff like that, I think that's where they really shine. But let me know what you think and which one that you would be picking down in the comments below. And while you're there, give us a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. But until next time, I've been Keiran. I've been bending over to pick this guitar up for the past 10-15 minutes, and hopefully it has shown you the differences between the Acoustasonic and the Highway series Fender acoustic guitars. Have a great day.